Hello everyone, and welcome to another Pokemon card video. Today, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. I'm actually here, talking to you guys, something I don't typically do, but I'm trying to find ways to engage you that isn't just opening booster packs. We open an awful lot of booster packs, don't we? We open a lot of modern, we open a lot of vintage, and I feel like if you're not opening some really expensive vintage, you gotta have some other content. So what I thought I'd do is just talk about economics. This is one of my favorite subjects. I'm a big finance nerd. I watch the news and I try to make predictions. And that's gone pretty well for me in life. Talking about finance is a very relevant subject because it helps you guys make smarter decisions and maybe avoid some of the mistakes that our parents and grandparents made in the past, right? You want to end life on a cruise and not in complete debt to whatever's going on in your country or in your state and your home. So I want to talk a little more about economics in these videos and how it relates to Pokemon cards, and that's what this is. Today, I thought we'd talk about the jobs report from April. If you guys were watching the news, there was a really disappointing jobs report for April. For April, they were predicting 1 million jobs to be added to the economy. And we're trying to recover from the pandemic, right? So coronavirus hits, everyone quits their job, everyone gets laid off, a lot of jobs are shut down, you have no choice. The stimulus checks come out, and we start recovering pretty rapidly afterwards, actually. I drew a chart. I tried this earlier. It shows up in reverse. Yeah, it does, like a mirror, right? But here you can see we had a ton of jobs up here, and actually this line should be higher. This was pre-pandemic. And then, it drops all the way down here. And you can see for a while it actually starts recovering pretty fast. And then around the elections, it slows down dramatically. So it slows down, and then we got April. And the April job reports were very disappointing because only 266,000 jobs were added to the economy, which is about a quarter of what they were predicting. Okay, so that was the prediction, was that it would be 1 million, and about a quarter of that came in. That's really bad. And why is that bad, and how does it affect Pokemon cards? So let's talk about the issue. So understanding why that's bad is a really big deal. The wealth of your country is your level of productivity. Okay, so a lot of people, I think, are confused about where money comes from. Money doesn't just come from a money printer. I mean, it's used, the money printer is used to have a fiat currency that you use to trade. But what are you trading? Really, you're trading the value that you created when you innovated, made a product, or offered a service to the society that society didn't want to do, and then you did it for them and they paid you for it. And when you're not being productive, you're not adding any value to the economy. But if you're consuming, you're also taking products out of the economy. So that's exactly what's been going on with all of these stimulus checks. The government hands you a check, and then you go and consume. You give it to a businessman, you consume his goods, and then he turns around and buys something fancier because he gets a lot of checks from a lot of people, right? They spend their checks at his place, so he goes and consumes something larger, and there's a big, cascade of product being devoured, and all of a sudden, the price of lumber shoots up, the price of steel shoots up, and eventually the price of goods will shoot up. So the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank for America, that's who gets to do all the money printing. They said there is a little inflation from all the money printing. They call it transitory, which means that they think it's not going to last very long. But Warren Buffett had his Berkshire Hathaway meeting and with the shareholders, and he said it's not transitory. He said the inflation's pretty bad, and he's expecting it to stick around. So that's what Warren Buffett was saying about inflation. And that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this subject, because we've seen the price of cards blow up. And at first, I thought it was just because people wanted to collect Pokemon cards. Pokemon card investing was kind of a new idea back then. There was investing in baseball cards, sport cards, but Pokemon cards are relatively new. They're, just like guys my age. We're pretty young still, actually, and guys younger than me as well. So people aren't really investing in Pokemon cards 2 years ago when I got started. There were some real big heavy hitters today who are probably much wealthier than you realize now, thanks to how much everything's blown up in price. But we were looking at, why did the cards go up in price? Demand went up, notability, or notoriety, or whatever the term would be. Logan Paul did his box break, but then also some other things happened. Everyone's at home from coronavirus and receiving free money. Ooh. So all of a sudden you've got $1,500 burning a hole in your pocket, and you go, what do I want to buy with this? Maybe Pokemon. Some people didn't even lose their jobs. So you've just got extra money. You've got your income already, which was enough for you to buy Pokemon cards with. And then on top of that, you've got your stimulus check. So you're like, let's go crazy. Let's buy all the Pokemon cards. all of a sudden, you've got Pokemon cards that have gone up in price times 12. And the booster box have well, they've more than doubled in price based on what they used to cost. They've more than doubled. Some of them have, and I'm talking about brand new stuff that's supposed to be cheap. You got businesses can't even get a hold of it from the distributors. You've got people in Japan are getting wiped out. We're buying up all the product from Japan. How weird, right? Like, how do they feel about that? I wonder. Like, hey, all these Americans are taking our Pokies. Yeah, it's a pretty wild time for Pokemon cards. And there's this constant talk about, oh, the bubble, the bubble, the bubble, the bubble's going to pop. I don't really think it's a bubble. I think it's more like a permanent thing, and it's a side effect from all this printed money, right? So all this money gets printed, and we run off and buy all the Pokies. The demand is higher on them anyways. And the question now is, are people going to dump all their Pokemon cards back into the market, and it's all going to crash? Well, I think what we've seen is some really expensive cards, like $20,000 cards, $10,000 cards. They get put in auction, and then when the auction ends, they really don't go for that much. And I think there's reasons for that. There's not a lot of people who have that kind of cash sitting around, and that means there's not enough competitors to drive the price of that card up, right? So like if you've got $20,000 and you could bid that Charizard up to $20,000, but you're the only one bidding, he only goes up to $5,000 or $10,000. So it's not so bad because there's not enough people sitting around waiting to buy him for that much money. So I think part of the problem is just auction. Why would you put Charizard in auction when you could have him sit around and buy it now? Maybe you want your money now, but if it was my Charizard, I'd rather just wait and put him in buy it now and just wait and wait and wait and wait. So that's an interesting phenomenon. Is that the bubble popping? I would say no, because if you look at many of the cards, a lot of the rare cards, a lot of like first edition WotC cards, trophy cards, cards that are like notoriously rare and desirable, they actually went up in price. Not the Charizard. The Charizards for some reason fell. Maybe it was because they were being overvalued. At some point, you do overvalue stuff. So maybe they were being overvalued a little bit. But you see a lot of the vintage stuff holds on to its value, and even some of the vintage stuff goes up in value. And if you're also tracking how many of them are being graded 10, it's not that many. So over a long period of time, very few 10s are being added to the first edition WotC sets. And you're not really seeing their prices fall that much, but their prices are holding steady, and a few of them are falling a little bit. Particularly the Charizards have fallen. But then you look at a modern, and it's kind of a similar story. You see some modern stuff appears to have been overvalued, like Delivery Pikachu. Dude, he was going for like 4K, wasn't he? I don't remember. Was it 4K? It was like 1,000 at least. And I remember back then, I was like, people are crazy. Why would you spend that much on Delivery Pikachu? Well, you look at him now, he's like 800 for a 10, and I wouldn't buy him until he's about 300, maybe 300 to 400. He's just a modern promo card. They make promo cards all the time, by the way, if you guys didn't know that. So he's a promo Pikachu, and you know, he's cute, and I wouldn't spend that much money on him, because if you spend that money on Delivery Pikachu, it means you can't spend it on an actually rare WotC card because it's gone now. So that's sort of like the opportunity cost problem. So anyways, we're talking about rarity. We're talking a little bit about how I feel the reason the price of the cards have been driven up is from all the stimulus checks. How does that relate to the April jobs report? So 1 million jobs were predicted. 266 jobs were actually added. That's a quarter of what we were expecting. It means that Americans are not working, and we're not adding anything to the economy. We're not adding products, we're not innovating new things, and we're not offering services that people need. And it means that we're consuming a lot of goods with printed money, and we're not putting anything back into the market to balance out the price of goods, right? So let's say there's 100 goods in the market, and then we consume 50 of those 100 goods, and then we don't add 50 new ones back to the market. Now there's only 50 remaining, right? Because we've eaten half of them. Well, those remaining 50 are now worth twice as much. That's exactly how it works, right? So if you have a butcher and a baker, and the butcher throws his pigs up for sale, and the baker throws his cakes up for sale, you got pigs and cakes to buy. But if the baker disappears and he's just buying tons of meat, the price of the meat's going to go up because there's nothing else to buy. So that's exactly how lowering your productivity while printing money creates lots of inflation. And Warren Buffett was saying that he was seeing a lot of inflation. And I think the Federal Reserve basically doesn't want to admit that there's inflation, because probably it would reflect badly on the economy in a way that might actually cause people to cause more inflation. I want to say it like that. You know, so whatever the Federal Reserve says, people will probably take that as a signal on what the Federal Reserve is going to do next or what to expect. And people will actually follow advice from the Federal Reserve, and they could actually cause more inflation by saying the wrong thing. So they have to say what they think is the right thing to say. But anyways, so probably the question I have for you guys is, why were there so few jobs added? Why were there so few jobs? Is it the case that 3 out of 4 people aren't looking? Maybe. Maybe people don't want their jobs anymore. There's a lot of crappy jobs out there. When I was younger, I unloaded trucks. It was terrible. It was a terrible, low-paying job. Very risky, by the way. Pretty dangerous. Like if a box of, it just depends on what it was I was doing at the time. I had a lot of different labor jobs, but there was all kinds of ways to get injured. And I'm being paid like, you know, $8 an hour was what I started at, and then eventually it was like $10 an hour, and then $12 an hour. It was really bad. So maybe people decided, hey, I don't need this job anymore. But what's supposed to happen when you don't take a job? You're supposed to go homeless, right? So eventually you're supposed to get foreclosed on or evicted from wherever you're living. If you don't have money to pay the bills, you're not supposed to eat. You're supposed to get kicked out of your home, and then you're a failure. People are supposed to fail. And that's actually what I think is going wrong here. It's also, I think, what went wrong in 2008. Remember the 2008 recession? Well, I think that we took all this taxpayer money and threw it at the banks because they're too large to fail. We basically saved them. We didn't have to. We could have let them. We could have let them just collapse, and they would have been eventually replaced by the businesses. That's what what business is about. You're supposed to be replaced if you're bad at your job. But instead, we bailed them out. They gave themselves huge bonuses, and then they bought their own stocks back up. They didn't treat the money very well, and and then we wrote some new laws so they couldn't be so reckless. But some of that got rid of. We got rid of some of that. However, so this time around in 2020, we said instead of bailing out the banks, we'll bail out mom and dad. We'll bail out the people. And I feel like the people basically are kind of doing the same thing. They're saying, well, I'm too large to fail now. I can't be foreclosed on, for example. So why pay rent? Why pay rent? I could take that cash and go buy Dogecoin with it. And my landlord would be like, hey, I need my rent. And I'll be like, so what? Landlords are parasites. Dogecoin to the moon. So it benefits you to buy Dogecoin and to forego paying your mortgage as long as you can, because you don't gain anything from paying your mortgage, but you do gain things from investing in an inflating stock market. So I think that what's going on here is people have found out that because of the generous benefits of the stimulus, just the entire stimulus package we got from both the Trump administration and the Biden administration is so generous, it makes more economic sense not to go to work and to continue to receive the benefits of being unemployed, maybe working a little side hustle, maybe you run around Walmart selling Pokies, I don't know, and accepting that check and also getting cash for whatever it is you're selling. It's hard to say. I can't say what everyone's doing. Maybe some people really can't find a job. I've heard that a lot of businesses are reporting that they can't find work, though. So that would suggest that it's more the case they can't find workers who want to return to the workforce. And that's a very bad sign for the economy. Because again, the way that you actually build wealth is people have to be working. You can't just print wealth, or else you'll experience inflation. In other words, there'll be more money supply, but not more goods. So the price of the goods have to go up to account for that larger money supply. And so in order to make America and its people wealthy, we all have to be productive in creating a service and innovating and all the good stuff that actually develops wealth. Then we have to be trading that with somebody who pays us for it, and then we go, yay, and then we buy something from someone else, and it goes back and forth, and all of a sudden we all have stuff like iPhones. That's great. If we don't do that, then all we do is consume what already exists, and then it blows up in price because we're not replacing it with anything. Will it change over time? I don't think it will. The Biden administration is the very strong message they've been sending for a while now is Bernie Sanders, the 1% and AOC, Green New Deal, we're going to spend trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in stimulus for the people. And this is what you would call a centrally planned government, which, by the way, it never works. And here's why. Because when you and I go out and we work, we toil in the field, we get a paycheck, and then we have to go shopping. And it's our money now, right? So we shop very competitively with what we do. Same for businesses, actually. Businesses are very competitive with what they do with their money. Because if they fail, they lose all of their, they lose their job, they don't get wealthy. When a bureaucrat or politician fails, maybe they get voted in next time, maybe not. It doesn't matter, it's not their money. So they're not under the same pressure to shop competitively like we are. It turns out the free market's very efficient. That's why Americans are so wealthy in the first place. A lot of you guys forget that. Americans are actually much wealthier than our European counterparts. We have many more millionaires than any other country in the entire world, even combined. It's just not that close. So anyways, my point is, obviously, you hear me talking, I'm a free market capitalist, I believe in the invisible hand and all that. Well, with the Biden administration, they're very big on centrally planned government where we'll provide the jobs for you, we'll choose the infrastructure bill. Oh, you know what, we need a train in California. How's that for people like in Missouri who aren't getting a hyperrail train, you know? So we'll take our federal government money and spend it in California and New York, but not in my state of Missouri. So anyways, they decide, hey, we'll spend that money and that'll be the most efficient use of the money. Will it? Because if it was the most efficient use of the money, why aren't people already building it for the profits? So anyways, the government tends to not use that money most efficiently, and they're going to print an enormous amount of money in the name of having to add more jobs to the economy. They'll call it like good paying jobs or something like that. And I believe that it will probably not all be wasted, but a portion of it probably will be spent wastefully. Some of it might go to pet projects. Some of it might just be a handout to their friends in another democratic state. That's how it feels a little bit. And you can feel free to disagree with me on that, because that dips into politics a little bit. But the other team does it too. Conservatives do it as well. I'm just saying what I appear to see, right? So I think that they'll try to add these higher paying jobs. They'll probably be temporary. They'll add enormous amounts of debt to the U.S. Debt, which is already insanely high. But people who believe in modern monetary theory, it's just inflation, that's all it is. They call it modern monetary. There's nothing modern about it. It's just people printing money. And people think that there's no consequence to it, essentially. But that's what economics is all about, is consequences. Consequences for your decisions in your attempt to fulfill your never-ending desires, because that's what everyone has, is an infinite desire for things. Which is why economics is so fascinating. It's why collecting is fascinating, by the way. We're all hoarders a little bit. So anyways, I think that the side effect of all this on Pokemon cards, I believe Pokemon cards will continue to rise in price. They've already reached a pretty high price. I think people are a little more hesitant to jump in because they're like, oh, it's so high already. How can it go up any further? Here's how it can go up even further. They give you more stimulus checks. This is highly likely. I can't tell you if they will for certain, but I think somebody will propose it. If it hasn't already been proposed, it'll be proposed. They will try to pass another stimulus check. That is my suspicion. If it gets passed, a lot more money will be pumped into the card market. Okay, the other part is they will spend a lot on this whole infrastructure bill, which, that they can do that if they want. It's not the worst thing, honestly. But basically what it'll be is a lot more money printing, and a lot more money printing means more inflation. The price of Pokemon cards will go up even more, in my opinion, because that money, even if you didn't receive the check, somebody did, and he spent it, and they spent it, and eventually it'll end up somewhere, whether it'll be in the stock market, or whether it's in collectibles, or whether it's in the real estate market, whether it's in gold. It'll end up somewhere. Eventually, some of it will go to China. So we'll buy Chinese goods. They'll be like, yay, we're rich. And China will send us more of their product, and we'll just keep pumping money over to China. And one day they'll be as wealthy as we are. And we'll be poor because we're not working. They're producing in China. We're not producing. That's how one country gets poor and another one gets wealthy. So that's where I think we're headed. And it's not a good thing. It's only good if you're already sitting on a lot of Pokemon cards. Same with like sitting on Dogecoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Same with sitting on lots and lots of stock. The question is, when does all of this crash, actually? How does it all go wrong if it does crash at all? Like, could it avoid crashing? It could. We could just live in a world where everything costs a lot more. So for those of you who took on debt to buy like a house, or took on debt to buy some other appreciating asset, the funny thing is when you have low interest rates on borrowing money and an inflating dollar, it is actually to your advantage to take out a debt and then go buy an asset, because the debt actually shrinks with inflation. If you owe $1,000, but then a bunch of money is printed, that $1,000 is easier to obtain because there's more money, and the $1,000 is devalued. So it's an economy where you're incentivized to go into debt to obtain appreciating assets. So Yeah, and I do consider Pokemon cards an appreciating asset. That's because if you're talking about the sealed product, that's a finite product that the government can't print. It's desirable. There's sort of like an art side to it, you know what I mean? It has entertainment value. Okay, so it is a productive asset because it has entertainment value. And people love opening it, people love seeing it opened, people love collecting it. And so over time, these finite booster packs will become exceptionally expensive. Kind of like the first edition booster packs are very expensive. They're like $10,000, $20,000, somewhere in that range, probably 15. That'll continue to go up. People will continue to open them until they're so exceptionally expensive that nobody will open them, and then you'll just be sitting on a very valuable collectible. At the same time, the first edition WotC cards will keep going up. Maybe some black label 10s, pristine 10s, perfect 10s will keep going up, but the modern cards, yeah, I'm expecting cards to just keep rising and rising and rising. And will the economy one day crash? Here's why I think it won't. I think the reason it won't crash is because most first world countries are doing the exact same thing. They're all printing money, they're all handing out stimulus checks, and basically I think a lot of the governments are all scared of the people right now, basically voting them out to do what's fiscally responsible and tell people, hey, you have to get a job or you're going to have to go homeless, right? That would tell people that they have to be productive. And this is one of the downsides actually to, I would call it a downside to democracy, is a point where your country can actually be weak because the people are in control. And what it is the people could suddenly realize, oh, we should just vote ourselves wealthy. Okay, but where's the wealth coming from? Who's doing all the work? Well, not me. I'm just voting for the wealth. It doesn't really work then because no wealth has been created, and eventually the goods have to go up in price. You can't just vote to print yourself money. You can't do that. You can't just vote to give yourself money. Eventually the price of the goods go up. The wealthy people who are already holding on to the assets become insanely wealthy because they've got something that's actually valuable. Money's not valuable, assets are valuable. And then, we'll eat the rich. Well, it turns out the rich have been reading books on how to not be eaten for like the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They've had lots of times to think this over. And it turns out they're a lot smarter than us, and they've already protected their assets from precisely that, having it taken by the government, and often they're friends with the government. So, if you want to protect the middle class, probably what you would do is you'd say, you got to hold us responsible for getting jobs and not just print money and not just do these huge stimulus bills. The solution from the Democrat Party is always to have a centrally planned government where the government gives you a home, the government gives you wages, the government gives you a social security net, and it inevitably doesn't work at some point. There's a point where you take so much money from everyone else that they're sick of it and they leave, or there's a revolt or something like that. That's how that ends. The money crashes. There's hyperinflation at some point, right? When there's hyperinflation, if hyperinflation set in, and I don't think it will, but if it did set in, it would be terrible. But I think probably what will happen is anyone who's sitting on a big pile of assets is about to become very wealthy. And people who are not sitting on big piles of assets are going to be the ones who suffer the most. And that would be young college age students. So if you're a young college student and you haven't had time to acquire a lot of assets, you're getting poorer right now as the money gets printed, because now it costs more to obtain the same Pokemon cards. And that's just sort of, you can have a parallel, is that the right word? That's sort of like an analogy to what's going on in the larger market. Real estate's exploding. So you're a college student right now and you're not ready to buy real estate. How are you going to afford it when you get out of school? The house I bought went up almost $200,000 since last year. And I still bought it. And that's because of the beliefs I hold right now about the US dollar and about what the Democratic Party will actually do. They won't allow people to go homeless. They won't allow people to be foreclosed on, because this will reflect poorly on them and they'll lose elections. So I think instead what they'll do is print money. And this will protect the people who already have assets, and it will decimate young people and poor people. So that's how it relates to Pokemon cards. My prediction for Pokemon cards is they continue to go up dramatically in price, unless the Biden administration cuts the benefits that make it economically smarter to stay home and not work. And if he allows you to be foreclosed on, and he allows you to basically fail in life. So life is supposed to be, you need to actually produce something for society and be part of society. You have to create the wealth that allows us to have generous social programs. If you're not generating the wealth, who pays for the social program, right? There's no way to afford it. And you guys can hold whatever beliefs you have. I mean, on a subject like this, you probably have some beliefs already, and we're just talking about maybe some ideas you've never heard about or you've never thought about before. This is stuff I think about all day. It's like my favorite thing to think about. And that's the direction I think is going. I'm not saying I'm right. But again, my prediction, all these cryptocurrencies will probably go up. All the collectibles will go up. Houses will go up. Gold will probably go up. Could have hyperinflation. It's possible. Probably won't, because all these other countries are also printing money. There'll be a huge transfer of wealth to China. They'll become very, very powerful and wealthy because they're actually producing. They're actually making goods and shipping them around the world. So they're going to be the money makers. We're going to be the money spenders, and we're going to be going into this inflation and debt. That's where I think is headed. All right. Wow, that was a long video, 25 minutes. I'll see you guys tonight in the live stream.